Are you a tax professional? Is this you during the tax season, frustrated and stressed? Well, it may be due to your tax software. Are you also looking for improved efficiency and profits? Well, you've come to the right place. Hi, and welcome to TaxForce Pro, the #1 software for tax professionals where a stress-free, more efficient, and profitable tax season is just a few clicks away.
Welcome everyone to Completing a Basic 1040. In today's webcast, I'm going to give you a brief introduction of the program. We're going to look at the work in progress summary and some of the benefits involved with it. We're also going to complete and process a tax return from beginning to end, and this includes adding a new tax return, the importance of the active options section at the bottom, using the tax estimator, completing the client data worksheet, adding forms, verifying for errors, printing, and transmitting the tax return. The software enables true tax professionals to accurately prepare and file large volumes of tax returns. We use intuitiveness, efficiency, and dependability as principles when we designed the software, which means it's easy to learn, easy to operate, and extremely fast and reliable regardless of how many tax returns you have in the system. In fact, in stress tests, we showed no discernible reduction in speed or accuracy when loaded with over 600,000 returns. Our software has been designed specifically for true tax professionals. It's not a questionnaire or menu-driven program. You don't need to wade through interview questions or layers of menus on your way to completing a tax return. Instead, we replace such methodologies with what true professional practitioners really want. They want speed, they want accuracy, they want a dependable software, and they want to control the software. They don't want the software to control them. And let me hop into the program here real quick. Each time you open the software, you land on the work in progress summary. And before we begin, I just want to give you a lay of the land. If you look at the very top here, this is what's called our menu bar. You can see when you click on these, the menu drops down and you can select any of these items as you wish. Now the menu bar changes depending on where you're at in the program. We don't offer tools in places that you don't need to use them, so we give you what you need right when you need it. Underneath that is what we call our toolbar. Think of these as quick function keys that give you access to things that you use quite frequently, such as transmitting to the central site or adding a new return to the system. The toolbar also changes depending on where you're at in the program. Underneath our toolbar is our information bar. The most important piece of the information bar happens to be right in the middle, and that includes the tax year you're working in, as well as the version of the program. On the left, you'll see your user ID number, and on the right, your login. And this white section is our work in progress summary, and we've divided this into 6 sections here, as you can see. Now, what we're trying to do with the work in progress summary is give you a snapshot of what's happening in your business in real time. Each time you add a return to the system, this number will increase. Each time you download a check to print, this number here will increase as well, just to give you an idea of the items that need attention. Starting with the tax return section of the work in progress summary, we have select a return. Now we can see we have 12 returns in the system. If we want to see those returns, simply click select a return. That'll take you to the return selection grid. If you want to see all the returns, go ahead and just click go, and it'll list all the returns out there for us. If you would like to filter your results or search for a specific item, you can enter information to search here. So I'm going to enter just the first couple of digits of our social security number, and then I'll click go, and it'll list out those returns that begin with that social security number. Also, last names are available too. If you'd like to look for a last name, just enter the first few letters and click go, and it'll bring that up for us. If we would like to change the search criteria, there's a little triangle right here. We can click on that and it'll allow us to change our search criteria. At any time you want to return to the work in progress summary, click the WIP button in the toolbar above. Underneath Select a Return is our status summary list. If you think about this, each return is in a pipeline, and each stage of that return is a stage in this pipeline. So you receive the information from the taxpayer, you enter their information into the return, and you submit it to the IRS. The IRS rejects it or accepts it. The check comes down. Each of these stages are a stage in the pipeline. And what Status Summary List does for us is it lists those returns in each of those stages. So you can see at the bottom here, there's my 12, and each of these stages has a number of returns in them. If I want to see these 7 returns that have the EF return status that are ready to be e-filed, I can simply double click and it'll list those 7 returns out there for us. If I'd like to see the checks that are ready to print, I can click on that and see those returns with check ready status. Underneath our status summary list is management dashboard. This is 7 different reports that you can run, and I'm just going to run a financial totals report here. You can select a date, you can select a start date or an end date, but I'm just going to leave those alone for now and click go. And this financial totals report will break down above here by day, by office, and by preparer. And each of these cells is selectable. If you'd like to look at the return that the report is detailing, double click on the cell and it'll list that return for you. That's our tax returns section. Underneath tax returns is printing queue. This is where you'll print tax returns if you want to print them in batches, pro forma information, or your acknowledgement letters from the state or from the IRS. But most importantly, this is where you print your checks. We'll click on Checks, Registers, and Activation, and it'll bring us into our Checks, Registers, and Activation window. Printing a check is as simple as marking the check that you want, and there's a Select All button down at the bottom if there's multiple, and clicking the Print Checks button. Also of note is our Test Checks button. This is used to test your check printing to ensure that it's going to work the way you need it to during the season. We have a Check Register tab. This is nothing more than a history of what happened to each check as it was printed out. And you can also reprint or void a check on the screen as necessary. Also, we have a Check Inventory tab to enter the starting and ending check numbers of the check stock at the beginning of the year. Underneath our printing queue is Other Items. This is more of an administrative queue where you'll update the software, you'll get support emails, bulletins, use today's appointments, backup returns, or use TextLink Plus. Over here at the top on the right is our transmit queue. Transmitting a return is a 2-step process. Inside the return, and we'll look at this a little bit later, but inside a return you'll click transmit and submit the return to the transmit queue. At that time you're able to come out to the work in progress summary, click transmit to central site. You'll be able to see your returns here, and if you click this filter button down below you'll be able to see the returns that are being sent. At this time you can click transmit and away the return goes to the IRS. Underneath that is our exceptions and rejects queue. This is where you'll see any of the returns that have an issue that needs to be fixed. Most importantly, we see here that I have 2 returns that are rejected by the IRS. If I want to look at those returns, simply I'll click on Fed Rejects, and it'll list those returns that are rejected right here. And I can open them up, and right away, the reason for the reject is shown to you. If you need more information, click on Details. Otherwise, double click on the rejection and it'll take you to the form and field that has the issue, so you can quickly begin to fix and resubmit the return. Also, if you look at the very bottom here in red, that rejection follows you. So if you get distracted and you need to come back to this, it'll be in red at the very bottom for you. Now this is a great time to talk about our text messaging feature. A lot of times you'll need to contact the taxpayer in order to resolve a rejection, and that takes time. What we've done is we've integrated a text messaging feature into the software. So you can see up here on the toolbar, we have a send text. If your customer has a cell phone and they opt in on the client data worksheet for text messaging, and you enter their cell phone carrier, we can send them a text message. This is great for those who are students or people who are at work. They don't have to feel like they have to answer the phone or memorize what you're telling them to bring in. It'll all be there available in a text message, and they can get to you at their leisure. Returning to the work in progress summary, our last section is a quick report section. You have the ability to pin up to 11 reports on the work in progress summary for your quick and easy access. If you'd like to run a report, and I'm just going to click on my client telephone list report, it'll list them out here. If you'd like to pin a report in the quick report section, up here in utility, our utility menu, we'll go down to quick reports list, and anything that's available on the right side here will be available to you on the work in progress summary. Simply double click and it'll move to the right side for you. And removing them is just as easy. Just double click on the right side and it'll move to the left side for you. That's our work in progress summary. Now let's look at starting a tax return. From the work in progress summary, you can click Add New, and that'll bring us to our Add New window. You can enter the Social Security number twice to confirm it. If you need a W-7, you'll have a W-7 available right here, and click OK. Now, one thing that we've integrated into the software is the ability to open a return based on scanning a barcode. Some of you may have seen barcodes attached to the source documentation, the taxpayer's W-2s, 1099s, K-1s, and so forth. All we need to do is click Add New, and I'll scan the barcode on my W-2 here, and you'll hear a beep, and it'll enter the Social Security number for us. We'll go ahead and click OK. And based on the information that's on my W-2 here, we begin the tax return for you. So you can see our name has jumped in here, our address, and if we look at the W-2, all of that scans in 100% correct. Also note at the very bottom, if it's scanned in, there's a box to be checked just to make sure that you've verified the information is scanned in correctly. Any additional source documents can be scanned using the Scan Barcode forms in the Attached Forms section. Now that we're inside a tax return, let me give you the lay of the land. Notice at the top, here's our menu bar again. We have a few different menus available to us: Return, Form, and Print. Here's our toolbar. Notice that it's greatly expanded with tools available to complete a tax return. Underneath that is our information bar with our taxpayer's name, our Social Security number in the middle, and the date the return was created over here on the right. Across the left is our Attached Forms section. This section shows you all of the forms that are attached to the return currently. If we want to move around the tax return, we can double click on any of the forms in our attached forms list to be brought to that form. And if you need to remove a form, just right click on it and click Remove Form. This is our Open Forms section. This is where most of the work will be done. And at the very bottom here, we have our active options. Now notice I'm going to go to my client data worksheet, and we're on the DOB field. If we want to know what DOB stands for, we can look at the active options section and see that it's the taxpayer's date of birth. Depending on where you're at in the program, each place will have a different line-by-line help for you. So if you're lost, you can easily just look at the very bottom of the program here and it'll show you. Now I'm going to quickly fill in some information here. Our date of birth, our name has already been entered, and our occupations. Now the occupations field, notice down here at the very bottom, choices is lit up for us. So now we have the ability to click on the choices button. We have databases connected to certain fields. So notice here in our database menu is our occupations database. And you can enter your own occupation if you wish. And on these fields, you can click on the choices and select from this list. Also, if you want to just type the first few letters, the program will guess what you want to have entered there. You can tab off of it. So just a place where we really help speed up the processing of a tax return. We'll enter our phone number, the cell phone number. Very important if we want to send a text message to our customers. Now again, the customers have to agree to receive a text message. So we'll click X on our keyboard here. And our cell phone carrier, again, we can choose these from a list. We'll choose AT&T, and it'll enter our carrier texting domain for us. Now down here on our filing status, if you don't know what needs to be entered here, we can again look at our active options and it'll let us know. 1 for single, 2 for married filing jointly, and so forth. And if I enter 1 for single and I hit tab, it's going to skip the spouse information and go directly to our address information. So we don't make you fill this out if you don't have to. If it's married filing joint, it'll go straight to that spouse information. I'm going to choose head of household here. There's our address information. Here's the taxpayer's bank account information. This is connected to what we call a dynamic database. And what that really means is you can enter the information directly on the client data worksheet and it'll be automatically entered into the bank RTN database, so you'll have it when you need it next time. So I'm going to choose mine from a list, enter the account number, and this information is very important to get correct, so we make you re-enter that. So re-enter it here just to make sure it's going to the correct bank account. And next we have our client referral. The great thing about the client referral section is it helps identify where you're spending your marketing money best. So if we look at this choice list here, if we've made flyers or if we have a radio ad, we can enter that here and report on this later to get an idea of what is bringing your customers into the office. If you're spending $100 on a flyer and $1,000 on a radio ad and more people are coming in because of the flyer, you might be able to spend your marketing money a little wiser next time. So I'm going to enter a referral. And lastly, we have our dependent information. So I'll enter our first name. If the last name of the dependent is the same as the primary taxpayer, just enter the first letter and it'll guess it for you. We'll enter a birthday. And notice it calculates the age for us. Enter a social security number and relationship. Now relationship is also attached to a database, so you have a lot of information you can choose from here. Or you can enter D for daughter, S for son, and it'll guess that for you and you can move on. We're on our months field. We look at the bottom here. This is the number of months the dependent lived with the taxpayer. We can enter CN if they lived in Canada or MX for Mexico. I'm going to go ahead and enter 12. And then based on the information we've entered, it will fill in the rest of these codes for us. Just like that. If we want to see what these are, simply select it. And this number 1 means dependent lived with a taxpayer. And these can be changed at any time. so you're not stuck with these codes. E means eligible for EIC, and this X means you're eligible for child tax credit. This code here is for dependent care for a 2441. Now notice here I don't have a 2441 attached to the return, but if I were to mark this and refresh, a 2441 would flow in there for us. And this last field here, this ST field, is specifically for Idaho grocery credit. Also notice down here that worksheets is lit up since we're on dependents. And this is if they have more than 9 dependents, we can enter it on an overflow worksheet here. And last but not least, down below in the active options, we have form links. And I'm going to go to the 1040 and scroll down to line 8 to line 9A for our form links. Now we can click form link, we can hit Control L on our keyboard, or we can simply double click on the field and it'll link us to that form and direct us to that field that needs attention. Choices, worksheets, form links, and the line-by-line help are very powerful tools to help you complete the tax return as fast as possible. That's our client data worksheet. Again, it's very important we start here because this information pulls into the rest of the tax return for us. Now, real quick, let's take a look at our tax estimator. That is in our return menu, second from the top, tax estimator. And the information entered on the estimator flows to the client data worksheet and vice versa, so you're not wasting any time by filling this out. It flows to the rest of the tax return for you. Also, this is very robust. I would urge you to fill out as much of this as you possibly can to get a realistic estimate for your taxpayer. The more of the tax estimator you complete, the closer the estimate will be to what they'll actually get back as a refund. Now we're ready to add forms. And we'll do that by clicking the Add Form button in the toolbar. Now notice we land on the W-2 because this is the most commonly added form. If you want to search for specific forms, you can enter the name in our search field. I'll hit C and it'll jump straight down to Schedule C. 8867 will bring us to the 8867 and so forth. If we don't know the name of the form, we can click this Index tab at the top and enter a description of the form instead. So I type child and it jumps down to the 2441 for us. Education goes to the 8863. Also, you can enter state information here if need. But we'll go back to our W-2 and we'll add a W-2. And notice here it asks us if we want to look at that original one that we have in there or if we want a new occurrence. I'm going to choose new occurrence. And when we open the W-2, we're landed on the employer identification number. This is another place that's a dynamic database, so information that you enter on this W-2 will automatically be saved to the database for next time. I'll click on choices. I'll choose one. There we go. Our wages. Now notice when I enter wages here and hit tab, lines 3, 4, 5, and 6 are calculated for us. I'll enter withholding, and then we're done. Any state information will be entered below. Now that we've entered our primary source forms, we want to enter any secondary forms such as Schedule C's, Schedule E's, and so forth. So I'll go ahead and quickly add a Schedule C. And I'll give it a name. And over here in business codes, here's another place where choices is available. So we have a listing of all the business codes. What I like to do is come to the description field and type a description. And just like the other choice fields, it'll begin to guess for us and enter that business code for us here. So that's very handy. Also, if we look, our Schedule C over here has unnamed activity, but if we refresh, the name that we gave it in line A jumps over here. So if we have multiple Schedule Cs, we can tell them apart by this little description. I'm going to go ahead and add a Schedule E. There we go. Now we've added our schedules, we can depreciate assets. And if we click Add Form, notice at the very end here we have a depreciation tab. Here's where we can depreciate a vehicle or standard assets directly to individual schedules. So let's look at a standard asset. I'm going to double click on my Schedule C. Here's our new asset window. Click New Asset, give it a description, and I'm going to depreciate a computer, our date placed in service, and then we'll find which code best represents the asset. And I'm going to go with code 2 here. We'll double click, and here we are. Now we want to enter how much that computer cost us, and when we hit tab, it'll flow over to the state for us automatically. And that's it. Now we're done. We can click Close. Here's our special depreciation allowance. We'll click OK. Return to list. Close one more time. And if we look at our Schedule C, here's our depreciated asset. If you have a vehicle to depreciate, we'll go back to the Depreciation tab and select Vehicle Allocation. Click New Asset. We'll give a description for the vehicle, and notice your choices here have been greatly reduced. We don't make you wade through all of the other standard asset codes to look at the vehicle assets. So choose the one that best represents the vehicle, double click. There we are. Now I want to show you a few things that come up frequently when dealing with vehicle assets. Say when we get here, I want to click on mileage and expenses. However, I get an error message when I do that. Please enter a cost basis. So it wants us to enter how much the vehicle cost us before we can move on to mileage and expenses. If I try to click on mileage and expenses again, I get a different error message. Please answer all vehicle questions before continuing. So you have to enter a cost and answer these vehicle questions before you can continue to mileage and expenses. So I'm going to quickly answer these questions. But was the vehicle used for hire? This has to do with our taxi cabs, and it affects the way the asset is depreciated. Remember, taxi cabs don't get mileage because they get paid for their mileage. So we're going to say no to this. There's no taxi cabs. Also, we have forced standard mileage rate here. If you enter both mileage and expenses, the program will calculate what is best for the taxpayer, what gets them the most refund. So we'll say no, we do not want to force standard mileage rate and allow the program to do that calculation for us. Now we'll click on mileage and expenses, and it'll allow us to go there. At the very top, we'll enter our mileage amount and our commute. If the taxpayer doesn't know the total commute, you can enter an average daily commute, and it'll calculate that for you. And also notice that we have 2 post and pre fields here because the IRS changed how much we get for our mileage. So I'm going to quickly add our mileage here, and I'll put in some actual expenses as well. And also we have our due diligence questions below. Do you have evidence to support your deduction? And is that evidence written? And then we're done. We can click Close. Here's our special depreciation allowance again. Click OK. Return to list. Close. close. And if we look at our Schedule C, here's our car and truck expenses. Our Schedule E, here's our auto expenses. Now that we've added all of our forms and an asset, we're ready to verify the tax return to make sure it's free of errors. So we'll click on Verify in the toolbar at the very top. And very similar to rejects, our errors are listed out. And we can double click on these errors to move to the area that needs attention. And notice when I fix the issue and hit Tab on my keyboard, it will go down to the next issue. I'll hit Enter on my keyboard again, and we'll go down to the next issue. Now let me close this tax return, and we'll open up another tax return that passes verification. Once all the errors have been removed, you'll get a successful message. Now we're ready to print. And before we print, I want to point out a few things. Connected to each return is a document archive. Now think of this as the folder that you put the printed tax return and any of the copied information, any of the printouts that you have. You put in this folder with your company name on it and hand it to the taxpayer when they leave. This replaces that. This helps us move into a paperless office. So connected to each return is its own unique document archive, and you can set the program up to print to this document archive. So each time you print, you can send that information to our document archive and save yourself some money on toner and paper rather than printing out a hard copy. You can send that information to the document archive rather than printing out a hard copy and save yourself some money on toner and printer paper, and move into a paperless office. Also, we've integrated a signature pad into the program. So if we look at our preparer information, this is set up at the beginning of the year, and we'll have a signature at the bottom, and these signatures are pulled into the tax return when it's printed. So the tax preparer signs once at the beginning of the year, and they never sign another tax return. So now we're ready to print. We'll click Print at the very top, and we'll have a Sign Doc button right here. Now notice we also have the ability to print straight to PDF if we want and encrypt that PDF, or print our hard copy from here. But we'll click Sign Doc, and I'll give my signature pad a little scribble here. If I don't like that, I can clear it. Otherwise, click Accept. And what happens is the return opens in a PDF format, and it gives you the opportunity to discuss emailing the return to the customer rather than printing out a hard copy. If you want to print out a hard copy from here, there's a print button at the very top. There's also a save button to save it to a flash drive. But if we look down here, everywhere there's supposed to be a signature, there's going to be a signature. All the federal documents, all the state documents, the taxpayer signs once, and all that flows forward. Here's our paid preparer, and here's our ERO, here's our taxpayer. So no more missing signatures. And again, the taxpayer only signs once, so there's no more of that ritual where you print out the tax return and highlight all those places that the taxpayer needs to sign or initial. They just sign once, and it's all done for them. Now that we're done printing, we're ready to transmit. But before we do that, I want to show you a couple of things. Now, if you want to prevent the transmission of a tax return, we have what's called bookmarks. So on any field, on any form, you can right-click, and you'll have the opportunity to enter a bookmark. So we enter our bookmark, we'll click OK. And now if we go to transmit a tax return, there's our bookmark. It won't let us go forward. We have to clear this bookmark before we can transmit to the IRS. Also, we have bookmarks available over here in the attached forms list. So So we can double click on that to see those bookmarks. We can delete them from here once that's been cleared, and now we're ready to transmit. Now remember, transmission is a two-step process. First, we'll queue the return to transmit on the work in progress screen, and then we'll be able to transmit to the IRS from there. So we'll send this to the transmit queue, and when we come out to our work in progress to transmit to the central site, there's our return. We can look at the filter to see that return, and if you don't want to send the return, you can unmark it, click OK, no returns are going, and you can click transmit to send that to the IRS. Now there are a few more tools in a tax return that I want to show you, so let's open up a tax return again. Now notice up here in the toolbar we have preparer notes. We can click new and enter any note we want. The great thing about this is it pulls forward into next year as well, and it's the first thing that pops up each time you open the return. So if there's a customer issue, anybody who works on the return will be notified right away. Also, we have quick available to us. So if we want to look at the status of a tax return without leaving this tax return, we can enter the Social Security number, and the return information will populate here, so we can see where that return is. Also with the bank disbursement information. This is a great way to status a return without leaving the return that you're working on. As a recap, let's go over 3 key items. The design of the software has always used intuitiveness, efficiency, and dependability as principles, and that means the software is fast, it's accurate, it's dependable, and you control it rather than it controlling you. This is a forms-based software. There's no need to spend time wading through questions or menus to complete the tax return. You just add the forms as you need them. And lastly, whenever you need help, please look to that active options section at the bottom of the tax return. Line-by-line help will guide you through the tax return, as well as the active option buttons, choices, worksheets, and form links will help you complete the tax return faster. Thanks for joining us today for this video, Completing a Basic 1040.